Hello everyone, my name is Martin Bialas, I am a member of Atavism team, and today I will present you Atavism faction plugin. In order to configure Atavism faction plugin, we have to open Atavism editor, so let's click on Window and let's select Atavism Online. So we can see Atavism editor and let's navigate to faction plugin. In order to do that, we can just put the name in the filter in the top section of the window, or we can just head into the proper group of plugins, and faction plugin is part of mob NPC group. So here we can find faction plugin. And faction plugin is basically responsible for definition of how the mobs or NPCs or races interfere between each other. So we can define approach or attitude between races, between some kind of players. For example, humans and dwarves can be friendly, can be neutral, or something like that. Or for example, humans can be enemies or hated for orcs. So we can define approach between mostly between races, and these races can be attached to the mobs, NPCs, and players, of course. So configuration is pretty simple. We can define name of the faction, and then we can define a group for that faction. We can define same group for multiple factions, and then we can define if the faction should be dynamic or not. So basically it means that the faction stance can be changed during the gameplay, during the player progress, for example. So we can imagine that we can have some guards in the city which can be neutral, or can be neutral for us, and they won't have any quests or tasks for us. And after we will fulfill some quests where we will gain our increase our stance versus that guards, then these guards can offer some quests or tasks for us after all. So this checkbox is responsible for dynamic option for the faction. Then we got default stance, which is as defined as here, as you can see on the list. So the most hated and the most honored on the bottom. Then we got even if we will define default stance for our faction, we can define something like fine grind stances between other races. So for example, by default this race, this faction can be friendly, but with, for example, humans, it will be set to hated. So we can add more versus, for example, NPCs, it will be neutral. So you can, even if the default stance is something and it will be applied to the stances between other factions, then you can override it and set different stance between another faction. So more information about factions can be found on our wiki. So it's wiki.atavismonline.com, and if you will put something like faction here, we can see that we got faction plugin, and here we can find some more information. So we got these fields also explained on our wiki, on our documentation, and here at the bottom we can see that we got stances definitions. So hated is -3000 and exalted is 3000. So this is the range definition for different types of this faction, which we had here. So yeah, here on the list. So -3000 up to 3000, and if the player will just will just gain any additional faction points, then the player will be able to just change the faction stance during the runtime, as I said. So for example, even if some orc camp can be set to, so orcs can be set to hated versus humans, and we won't be able to enter that camp. For example, we can put some orc shaman or something outside the camp. So and set that orc, particular one orc to neutral or friendly, and that orc can just give us some quests, which will in turn increase our stance versus orcs. So after all, we will be able to enter that camp, and these orcs inside that camp can be friendly or neutral for us, and gives us more quests and more tasks. So this is even if this plugin is really simple to configure, it is very usable, and you can use it in multiple ways. So that's all for this part. Thanks for watching. I hope you like it, and see you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.